So, shalom everybody. Hi, my name is Eli. I'm originally from a place called Teaneck, New Jersey. New Jersey was so amazing that I left there about 13, 14 years ago, and I made the move to the Holy Land. And since then, actually I get a little story about this. There I was a few weeks into it, and I'm wandering around the streets of the old city of Jerusalem. And I bump into a few people I know from Toronto, Canada. And me and them get to talking. And with them, there was this other young lady. Me and her get to talking. What do you know, to make a short story shorter, me and this gal end up getting hitched. And so it just goes to show you that some people come to the old city of Jerusalem for God, other people for the ladies. Anyway, this is a great story. But what happened after was even more interesting, right? Because after this, we lived in a number of locations. We lived in an area called Gush Etzion, it's about 20 minutes south of Jerusalem. We lived for 2 years in Beersheba in the south, living across the street from Ben Gurion University. We're involved with outreach on the campus there. We lived a year in another neighborhood in Jerusalem, and then actually since then, for the last 8 years, we've been blessed to live in the old city of Jerusalem, living in a place overlooking the spot that we met. Right? And so this is a great story, but actually has nothing to do with why I'm here talking to you today. What brings me here to talk to you today is that when I was growing up, and I'm sure there are people here from all sorts of backgrounds Jewishly, maybe some people have some Jewish background, maybe some people know Jewish background, maybe some people like a Jewish kind of background, if you know what I mean. But when I was growing up, anything I ever heard about Judaism was a lot about the what's of Judaism and the hows of Judaism. What to do, how to do it, but like, why on earth should I be involved in this? Why on earth might I care? Why on earth might it make a difference in my life? Somehow those whys were always passed over. And so growing up, this always bothered me. And so when I had the opportunity, I decided I have to check some of this stuff out for myself. And so I came to Israel and I started kind of a search. And it started out as a philosophical pursuit, but ultimately evolved into something a little bit more deeper, a little bit more personal, more to the spiritual side of things, a little bit more to the Kabbalistic side of Judaism. So essentially this is what I do now, is that I try to give over to different groups, whether they're coming through Israel or also wherever I go, try to give over a little bit about the whys of Judaism, the deeper meanings of things, deeper spirituality, or foundational and philosophical background behind why we do what we do. And so what I want to share with you today is a little bit about the concept of freedom, because that's a topic that's pretty popular, especially in the Western world, but we should understand a little bit about what we mean by freedom. Because if you were to ask your average Joe, or perhaps in this case, your average Jew, walking down the street, if you were to ask them, what is freedom? Gut response, right? Most people will say that what we mean by freedom is gut response, whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, right? And so at first glance, that is our perception, and that's the perception we were raised with. But if you think about it, I'm not so sure if that definition really fits, right? Because I want to tell you a story about a friend of my wife. We will call her Rebecca, because that's her name. And she was but 11 years old when she first had her first encounter. She heard about smoking. It was a really cool thing, and she figured, I've got to give this a try. So sure enough, she finds her way to a cigarette at age 11, and she starts to, she takes that first cigarette. And so what do you think? Do you think that she enjoyed this experience? Right, so of course not. She did not enjoy that experience, right? But what do you know, already at the age 11, Rebecca was such a deep thinker and understood the world in such a way that she knew that some of those finer tastes in life need to be acquired over time. And so sure enough, Rebecca goes ahead and she continues to take cigarette after cigarette. And now fast forward 20 years down the road here, now Rebecca, nowadays, she's not just someone taking a cigarette here and there, but now she is a smoker. Right now she's someone who is ongoing, day in, day out, probably smoking about a pack a day. And so what do you think? In the last 20 years, has Rebecca tried to quit smoking? Right, of course she has. Right, we know there's a little line that says that every smoker, quitting smoking is easy. Every smoker does it at least once a month, right? So Rebecca goes ahead and she tries to quit here and there. But nevertheless, here we are today, and she is a smoker. So now when Rebecca goes ahead and she reaches into her purse and she pulls out the cigarette, she lights it up, and she starts smoking, would we say that this is an expression of her freedom? Right? No, I don't think we would, right? However, we would be able to say that she's doing whatever she feels like doing whenever she feels like doing it, right? And so we have to take a look at what we really mean by freedom, right? Because what we see is that whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, actually there's a little bit of personal, kind of a slavery of self in that, if that's how we roll all the time, right? Like, and for example, imagine you have a guy who actually lived like this. Imagine you have a guy he was put on planet Earth, and this guy, he wanted to live free, and he knew, he was raised by society to believe that freedom means whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, and so he decided, okay, he wants to be a free person, and so this guy, for literally, imagine he lived for 80 years, and he literally, whatever he felt like doing, whenever he felt like doing it, this is how he lived the entirety of his 80 years of life. So imagine this guy, after this amount of time, so afterwards, he leaves this world, he goes upstairs. Imagine the conversation, right? God says to the guy, so I gave you 80 years on planet Earth. What'd you do with your time? So imagine this guy's response, right? God, you'll never believe it. Whatever I felt like doing, whenever I felt like doing it, that's exactly what I did. Right? So imagine God's response to that, right? God probably says to him like, oh, really? Okay, you go over there with the donkey, you go to animal heaven, right? You go there with the donkeys, right? That's what they do. Whatever you feel like doing, whenever you feel like doing it, that's, in a certain respect, that's animal living, right? That's autopilot. After all, where's the assertion of the self? Where's the assertion of the I? Where's the real freedom of self, right? Let me counter this with another story. Imagine, actually this is a true story about my grandfather, a little more personal this time, that my grandfather, he was a little late to the whole smoking game. He actually first started smoking around age 15 or 16. And not only has he become a smoker, but it's become part of his persona. He had his smoking jacket. Every picture that was taken either had this jacket, and maybe it's him with a cigarette or a pipe or whatever it is, right? And going through life, ongoing, he gets married, he has kids, so what do you think? Did his family, were they happy with the fact that he was a smoker? What do you think? Right, of course not. And so nevertheless, he continues to be a smoker until, after a certain amount of time, one of his kids, my uncle Elliot, he grows up and he starts to actually appreciate the taste of a good cigar from time to time. And so my Uncle Elliot kind of became my grandfather's default ally in the family. Anyway, sure enough, time passes, and my grandfather's getting older, and his health ain't what it used to be, and he actually started to smoke a little bit more. And so the family starts to get really concerned, until one day, there's my grandfather sitting at the table. He's got the paper in one hand, he's got the pipe in the other, and Uncle Elliot, his ally in the family, walks around, sits down right across from him, and says to him, you know, Dad, it's getting to be a bit much. You're older now, you're smoking more than what you used to, your health ain't what it used to be, it's enough already. At that moment, my grandfather looks at my uncle, looks at the pipe, looks at my uncle, puts down the pipe, never picks it up again. After 40 years of smoking, quit on the spot. True story. Fast forward though, a minute and a half later, when my grandfather gets the urge to smoke, and then he doesn't, would we say that that is an expression of his personal freedom? Yeah, I'm sure we would, right? But he's not doing whatever he feels like doing whenever he feels like doing it, right? And so it seems like we have to kind of take a step back from our definition of freedom and kind of reevaluate, right? And I think that if we wanted to think more about freedom, I think we'd have to say that what we really mean by freedom is that freedom means that I'm able to free myself from myself, take a step back, and go in a different direction than whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, right? And the crazy thing is that our society really kind of puts us in this mindset of, and kind of makes like our vision of paradise and utopia is with this kind of free, whatever you feel like doing, whenever you feel like doing it, lifestyle, right? Think about it. Just our gut response, or your average Joe's gut response. When you think paradise, what's the picture that you think, right? So immediately what comes to mind is, you know, there you are laying on a white sandy beach, right? And you don't even have to, whatever I feel like doing, whenever I feel like doing it, I don't even have to move, right? And so what we're saying here is, though, that real freedom, and ultimately what's going to be the foundation upon which real joy is built, and real joy is another conversation, but real freedom means that we're able to go ahead and free ourselves from ourselves to make a move in a different direction, right? Which means to say that, yes, I have a certain desire, a certain yearning, a certain gut sometimes to go in one direction, but the ability to free myself from this and go in a different direction, that's real freedom of self, right? And matter of fact, it says this in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of the Fathers, Teachings of the Rabbis, it says, Ezohu Gibor, who is the strong person, hakoveshet yitzro, the one who conquers his or her inclination, right? Meaning to say, it doesn't even say evil inclination. Whatever the inclination is, if a person wants to be truly strong, inner strength, real personal strength and ownership of oneself means that I'm able to conquer my inclination. Whatever my inclination is, I take a step back from that, and I'm able to move in a different direction. And this is so at the core and the prerequisite of what we need Jewishly, that you see it right at the beginning of the story of the Jewish people. Right? Matter of fact, the Jewish family begins this way. Actually, written in the Bible, it's written in the Bible itself. The first thing that you find, the father of the Jewish people, Abraham, the first thing you find that God says to Abraham in the Torah is Lech lecha mi'artzecha u'moladetecha mibeit avicha la'aretz asher arecha. Right? Lech lecha, go to yourself. That if you want to go to the reality of who you are, God says there is a 3-point plan I have that is prerequisite. That if you go ahead and do this, it will open up the door for you going to your personal potential. Right? And God says you have to leave, number 1, from your land, number 2, from your birthplace, and number 3, from your parents' house. But can you hear the idea that when it talks about from your land, your birthplace, and your parents' house, it doesn't just mean a physical location, although that might help. But what it really means, or what it means on a deeper level, is that we all have our certain, leaving from your land, right? The atmosphere of your land, the energy of your land, right? Your culture, right? And to leave from your birthplace, right? What does it mean from your birthplace? Also, not just the location, but we all have a certain quote-unquote place we're born in. Certain character traits, certain emotional responses, certain genetic predispositions, right? That certain people are more into one thing or another, right? That's biological. By the way, take note that recently in psychology, in the last 100, 200 years, they came out with an idea called nature versus nurture. Take note that this concept was already in Tanakh all the way back, in the Jewish Bible, all the way back to the time of Abraham, right? So to leave from your culture, from your land, right? From your birthplace, meaning your genetic predispositions, and also from your parents' house, right? And we all know that we are, whether we know it or not, we're heavily influenced by by what we picked up in our parents' house. Not what they taught us, but what they actually did, right? And by the way, there's a great example of this. One way to see it is, I remember watching one of these talk shows in America that are on late at night, and the host comes on and says to the audience, listen, tomorrow is Halloween, and what he tells his audience to do is to take he tells them to after the kids come home with their treats, with their candy, when they go to sleep, take their bag of candy, kind of steal it, put it aside somewhere. Then in the morning, when they wake up looking for their bag of candy, tell them you ate it, videotape the response, and then send it to us, right? And so sure enough, a day or two afterwards, they air a show where they show the clips of different kids and their responses. And pretty much all of them cry pretty much. Right? But then there's one kid who bangs his fist in the table. Another one bangs his head in the wall. And then there's actually another one throwing things across the room. And then there's this other girl who sat down across from her mother and started talking about her feelings. But Mom, why would you do this? Didn't you know how it would make me feel? Right? And so of course, yes, it's funny. We all laugh at that. That's good. Wonderful. But if we just scratch the surface a little bit, we can see, why is it that one kid reacted one way and one kid another way? Why did one kid throw something across the room, another kid bang his head on the table, and another child sat down and talked about their feelings? So what I want to put forth here is that 90%, and by the way, of course, we all know that 80% of statistics are made up. So what I'd like to put forth is that 90% of the time, or 90% of this response comes from the way the parents reacted when something happened to them that they didn't like or that they thought was not fair. Right? That will determine the child's first nature. And so what God is saying to Abraham is, look, if you want to go to yourself, if you want to go to the reality of who you are, if you want to go on your personal path of freedom and ultimate self-determination, prerequisite is we have to take a step back from our land, our birthplace, and our parents' house. And only then we'll be able to go ahead and go to the land that I will show you, to your own personal promised land. But first, the prerequisite is freeing oneself from the stuff that's been gone in, that to appreciate what went in, to use the positive things that went in, but use it in a place of choice, use it from a place of consciousness, use it from a place of awareness that I'm taking this piece of my past and using it for my future and for my destiny. Don't use it as a way of habit and autopilot, but to be able to take the positive things of our past, to leave the negative and take the positive things in a conscious way, and then to go ahead and use that towards our personal promised land, right? Our personal destination. And by the way, just to show you how pinnacle this is, in Judaism, not only does this exist at the beginning of the Jewish family, this also exists at the beginning of the Jewish nation, right? If you fast forward to the Jewish people are enslaved in Egypt, right? But can you hear the idea that Egypt isn't just the physical place, and it's not just about Jewish history, but really the story of the Jewish people and anything in the Torah has to do with our own personal self-growth, right? And so when we read about the Jewish people in Egypt, it's not just Jewish history, it's about each and every one of us right now. That we all have our own personal Egypts in our life. Matter of fact, the word Egypt in Hebrew is the Hebrew word Mitzrayim, which is from the word Meitzarim, which means boundaries, borders, constrictions, that which is holding us back. It means to say when the Jewish people were in Egypt, it wasn't just a physical servitude, it was a servitude on all levels. Physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual. And so the same thing with each of us. We all have our own personal Egypts, our own boundaries, borders, constrictions that are holding us back. Right? Whether it be physical, whether it be emotional, whether it be the way we were raised, whether it be the way our parents talked to us. Right? Matter of fact, I once heard a line which said that be careful how you talk to your kids, because the way you talk to your kids will become their inner voice. Right? So we have our certain ways we're spoken to, and then we perpetuated that in our minds. We perpetuated that. There were boxes built for us, and we went ahead and continued to build them oftentimes. Right? And so we have our own personal Egypts, right? But then what happens with the Jewish people? They go ahead and they leave Egypt, right? And where do they go? They go to the desert, right? And what's in the desert, right? Nothing, not much, right? And that's really the statement. The statement is that if we want to go onto our personal path of ultimate fulfillment and joy and all wonderful good things, self-actualization, right? Prerequisite is we have to leave from our personal Egypts, take a step back from that, and go to our personal place of desert, right? Take our personal place of nothingness, of true openness, of true open-mindedness, right? Like not the open-mindedness of your university campus, where if you say something against what they have to say, they will destroy you, right? That's not the open-mindedness I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is true open-mindedness, the real ability to go ahead and step out of yourself, step out of your surroundings, step out of your culture and your preconceived notions, right? And to take a real look at the world, society, life, what different beliefs have to say, etc. To be able to do that in a real free way. To the extent we open ourselves up, to the extent we become desert-like, it's to that extent we can actually receive a new piece of information in a real way, right? Because if not, any new piece of information we get, we kind of start editing it and chopping it and slicing and dicing it to fit in with our preconceived notions, and we leave out half of it and we include the other half, which actually already fit into whatever we believed in our preconceived notions, right? And so this is one reason why God gives the Torah to the Jewish people in the desert specifically, right? Because to the extent we open ourselves up and leave our personal Egypts and make ourselves desert-like, it's to that extent we can receive the Torah, just like any piece of information. It's that extent we can receive it in a real way, in a way we can really grapple with it, in a way we can really think about it and ask real questions, not ones that are already skewed from our past, but to the extent we can become more objective, to the extent we can become more open, to that extent we can view it in a real way, in a way of freedom, in a way of personal ownership, and we can hopefully integrate it in our lives day in and day out, level by level. And so I want to bless us all that we are able to work on ourselves in whatever ways necessary in order to attain our personal freedom, to be able to go ahead and open ourselves up and then really be able to take in and approach new issues in new ways from a new perspective. And we should all live very fulfilled lives.